All right, everybody. How's everybody doing? Good. So we are going to start out with a quick video, a Bible Project video, about 3 minutes. I've had a couple people ask me, it's okay, we've been talking about shalom, but could you redefine it for us? We need to remember what this word means. They do a really good job of that, and I know we also have a couple new faces here too, so want to start us out on this sermon with just Tim Mackey's take on what shalom means. So without further ado, go ahead and run it.
The word peace is common in most languages. People can talk about peace treaties or times of peace. It means the absence of war. And in the Bible, the word peace can refer to the absence of conflict, but it also points to the presence of something better in its place. In the Old Testament, the Hebrew word for peace is shalom. And in the New Testament, the Greek word is eirene. The most basic meaning of shalom is complete or whole. The word can refer to a stone that has a perfect, whole shape with no cracks. It can also refer to a completed stone wall that has no gaps and no missing bricks. Shalom refers to something that's complex with lots of pieces that's in a state of completeness, wholeness. It's like Job, who says his tents are in a state of shalom because he counted his flock and no animals are missing. This is why shalom can refer to a person's well-being. Like when David visited his brothers on the battlefield, he asked about their shalom. The core idea is that life is complex, full of moving parts and relationships and situations, and when any of these is out of alignment or missing, your shalom breaks down. Life is no longer whole, it needs to be restored. In fact, that's the basic meaning of shalom when you use it as a verb. To bring shalom literally means to make complete or restore. So Solomon brings shalom to the unfinished temple when he completes it. Or if your animal accidentally damages your neighbor's field, you shalom them by giving them a complete repayment for their loss. You take what's missing and you restore it to wholeness. The same goes for human relationships. In the book of Proverbs, to reconcile and heal a broken relationship is to bring shalom. And when rival kingdoms make shalom in the Bible, it doesn't just mean they stop fighting, it also means they start working together for each other's benefit. This state of shalom is what Israel's kings were supposed to cultivate, and it rarely happened. So the prophet Isaiah, he looked forward to a future king, a prince of shalom, and his reign would bring shalom with no end, a time when God would make a covenant of shalom with his people and make right all wrongs and heal all that's been broken. This is why Jesus' birth in the New Testament was announced as the arrival of eirene. Remember, that's the Greek word for peace. Jesus came to offer his peace to others, like when he said to his followers, "My peace I give to you all." The apostles claimed that Jesus made peace between messed up humans and God when he died and rose from the dead. The idea is that he restored to wholeness the broken relationship between humans and their creator. This is why the Apostle Paul can say Jesus himself is our eirene. He was the whole complete human that I am made to be but have failed to be. And now he gives me his life as a gift. And this means that Jesus' followers are now called to create peace. Paul instructed local churches to keep their unity through the bond of peace, which requires humility and patience and bearing with others in love. Becoming people of peace means participating in the life of Jesus, who reconciled all things in heaven and earth, restoring peace through his death and resurrection. So peace takes a lot of work because it's not just the absence of conflict. True peace requires taking what's broken and restoring it to wholeness, whether it's in our lives, our relationships, or in our world. And that's the rich biblical concept of peace.
Pretty cool, huh? It's amazing what you can pack into 3 minutes. So much depth, so much richness to that word, shalom. Even more so than kind of our general understanding of the word peace. And so what I really want to hone in on, though, the thing that resonates the most with me and I think is going to apply most to the lesson today is this, that shalom is not just the absence of turmoil or conflict, but is the experience of wholeness. A sense that things are as they should be. They're made to be as they were intended from the beginning. So we've talked a lot in this series about how to capture shalom in less than ideal times. And today I want to talk about when times are good. Does situational shalom, where your environment is shalom, it is whole, it is good, does that necessitate that you will feel whole inside your heart, inside your mind, internally? Not necessarily. And we've heard the stories time after time of successful business people, of, famous celebrities or athletes or what have you, different people who have great success, have the world at their fingertips. Everything seems shalom on the outside, but there's no shalom. There's no wholeness on the inside. And so why is that? Actually, the reality is that sometimes our external shalom, things being as they should be, can sometimes actually detract and be the thing that contributes to our brokenness. I don't know if you've heard this saying before, but it goes like this. Hard times make strong people make good times. Good times make weak people make hard times. Do you get that? One of the big points of this phrase is that when things go our way, sometimes it whittles down on our character. It weakens aspects that are core to us and make us less than what we could be, what God is wanting us, desiring for us to be. We experience stagnation or we experience decline. But does it have to be that way? Well, I am here to tell you that it does not have to be that way. And so the title of today's lesson, I'm going to sell you some insurance. I'm going to sell you Shalom Insurance. Yes, thank you. Where you need to insure your shalom for the rainy days. The thing about insurance is that you need to establish it during the good times, because if the bad times have already come, it's too late to get that insurance. So there's actually a quality about when life is shalom, when things are good, is the perfect time to ensure your own internal wholeness, your internal shalom. So the purpose of this lesson, the purpose of this message is to assist you in securing your wholeness when times are good. The scriptures in the Old Testament and the New Testament agree on really what's at the heart, what's at the basis of securing your wholeness. The key to wholeness is, surprise, surprise, staying near to God. So let's go ahead and look at Deuteronomy 8, verses 10 through 18. Wonderful passage. And the context before this passage is that God is starting to bring his people into the promised land. And so he says, listen, I'm about to bring you into the promised land, but I want you to remember this. He says, when you have all that you want to eat, then praise the Lord your God for giving you a good land. Be careful not to forget the Lord your God so that you fail to obey his commands, laws, and rules that I am giving you today. When you eat all you want and build nice houses and live in them, when your herds and flocks grow large and your silver and gold increase, when you have more of everything, then your heart will become proud. You will forget the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt where you were slaves. He led you through the large and terrible desert that was dry and had no water, and that had poisonous snakes and stinging insects. That's what it kind of felt like moving to Texas with all the scorpions and things. We don't really have those in Washington. He gave you water from a solid rock and manna to eat in the desert. Manna was something your ancestors had never seen. He did this to take away your pride and to test you so things would go well for you in the end. You might say to yourself, I am rich because of my own power and strength. But remember the Lord your God. It is he who gives you the power to become rich, keeping the agreement he promised to your ancestors as it is today. So one of the major themes that you see through the Bible, if you're acquainted with the Bible, is seeing the Israelites go through good times and forgetting God. They go through bad times, they call upon the name of the Lord, and God saves you. And then, of course, times get good again, and then they forget God. It goes through this pattern many, many, many times, and that is a reflection on how we are typically as human beings. They turned to other idols, their concerns became about other things than God, and really the point here is that the great wholeness killer of our lives is starting to believe that we can be whole on our own. When we start to think, I'm good on my own, I'm whole on my own, that is the beginning of our downfall. Pride comes before the fall. If God made us, he alone knows what it looks like for us to be whole. If he's the one who knit us together, then he also knows how to repiece us together when we've been broken. He knows the way to make us whole again when we've been broken. And that's really the picture here, is that we need God. He's the one who made us. He's the one who knows. And in the New Testament, it also says something very similar in Luke 12, verses 16b through 21. This is in the New Living Translation. It says, "A rich man had a fertile farm that produced fine crops. He said to himself, 'What should I do? I don't have room for all my crops.' Then he said, 'I know, I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. Then I'll have room enough to store all my wheat and my other goods. And I'll sit back and say to myself, my friend, you have enough stored away for years to come. Now take it easy, eat, drink, and be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, you will die this very night. Then who will get everything you worked for?' Yes, a person is a fool to store up earthly wealth, but not have a rich relationship with God." We see kind of a similar inner dialogue between the people in these passages, the person who is forgetting about God. Listen to these statements again. This one's from Deuteronomy. "I am rich because of my own power and strength." And this one from Luke. "I have enough stored away for years to come. Now I'll take it easy, eat, drink, and be merry." What this is really warning us about is that when things are good, it's easy to slip into pride. It's easy to slip into passivity and into self-indulgence. We get prideful, we get passive, we get self-indulgent. And in the passage we looked at in Deuteronomy 8 gives us a place to start in being able to get close to God again, to be able to make sure that we don't get to that place of pride, of passivity, and self-indulgence. It tells us that we need to begin by becoming more aware of what God has done in our lives. Because think about it, being aware of what God has done in our lives, it challenges each of those tendencies we have. With regard to pride, it's kept in check because we realize that ultimately it's God who's done these things. It's not me. I'm not the one who has brought these good things about. Every good gift comes from the Father of lights in heaven above. He's given us life, breath, and everything else. These are other scriptures that support this idea that it doesn't originate from us. And yet we like to think that it does. That feels more comfortable. That feels more secure. We want to be the people who kind of take hold of our future, and we want to be the ones to say, look what we have accomplished. And yet, it's ultimately because of God. Now, being passive, that gets challenged too, because we're reminded that God's investment in us means that he sees us as highly valuable and that life has a purpose. If God has invested at that level, if you start to see all the things that God has done in your life, then you think, listen, I can't just lay back and not do something with this. God has done these things for a reason. Otherwise, we're treating this great gift, life that he has given us, with great disdain. There's a purpose here. Otherwise, he wouldn't have created us to begin with or sustained us in the amazing ways that he has. And so we can't afford to be passive. It calls us to actively pay forward the things that he has given us. It also challenges our self-indulgence because the more that we understand what God's done for us, just a natural deep appreciation is going to come pouring out of us. Our sense of God's greatness is heightened, making us want to actually live for him. And so one of the best examples of my own life that I'd like to share about this, in which I was in a season where just things were shalom. Things just felt whole, they felt good, was in the years between 2016 and 2018. These were the years that Elise and I started dating, where we got married, we went into ministry, and we could see so clearly all the ways in which God had invested in us to bring us to that point. We could see that this wasn't our own doing, that we were starting to be blessed in these ways that were very exciting, that were the dreams that we were hoping to accomplish. We saw the thread of God's activity. For me, there were people who financially, like above and beyond, financially supported me in being able to go to school, to go to Washington, where I was able to get plugged in with the church there, who were people who were teaching me about the Bible. I didn't know if you were wanting me to say something. Sorry. She was mouthing something to me, so I was like, oh, my wife. So we see the threads of what God is doing in our lives. And for me, like I said, the financial support, seeing people invest in me, help me understand repentance and discipleship, the great gift that is, as well as God working, in ways for me to be able to overcome certain aspects in my life that had come from some serious family dysfunction. There was no reason for us to be able to have life so good at that point in time. To be able to have dated, to be married, to go into ministry. None of those things seemed many times in my life like those were even possibilities. And so clearly to us, it was a gift from God that he had invested in us, that he cared for us. And so we were really devoted in our early dating and in our marriage to pay it forward. Serving in various capacities, from small group leading or worship leading or going on a mission trip and different things like that, just encouraging people who are discouraged. We always wanted to make sure that the gift that God had given us wasn't going to turn us inward, where we'd start becoming prideful, passive, self-indulgent, instead turning it outward. And I think that has also carried us through some of the most difficult years of our life in 2019 through 2022. With things that I've shared before, my dad's death, miscarriages, global pandemic, have your pick. The storms will come. Like it says in Matthew 7, the storms will beat on your house, but your house will stand firm if you're built on the rock. So taking that time, building your shalom, building your life on top of Jesus allows you not also to be able to weather those storms that will come in the future. And it certainly sustained us in that time. So now if we're talking about this idea of recognizing the threads of God's activity in our lives, perhaps you're relatively new to Christianity or church or things like that, and you're like, I don't have much of a relationship or concept of God right now, so I'm not really trained to see that in my life. Or maybe you've also been going to church for a long time, you're a Christian, and yet you realize that this ongoing thought is not consuming your thoughts. It's not pouring out into the way you speak and the way that you act, recognizing that God is doing something. Because it's easy to go through the just church motions. And so we have to remind ourselves, we have to have certain kinds of tools, certain kinds of activities that allow us to slow down, to reflect, and see what God is doing. So I've got 4 things for you I'd like to give you as opportunities, things that you could do in this coming week to enhance your ability to see God's activity in your life. The first one is called the prayer of examine. And this is an old practice. This is one of the spiritual disciplines that is all about curiosity. And so I have this book by Adele Calhoun, Spiritual Disciplines Handbook, and this was part of one of my classes. And she describes this prayer of examine, and it says, the examine is a practice for discerning the voice and activity of God within the flow of the day. It is a vehicle that creates deeper awareness of God-given desires in one's life. And really what it is it's a reflection at the end of your day to be able to see what God's been up to, and you ask yourself certain questions. You might ask, for what moment today am I most grateful? For what moment today am I the least grateful? When did I give and receive the most love today? When did I give and receive the least love today? What was the most life-giving part of my day? What was the most life-thwarting part of my day? And so on and so forth. These kind of reflective questions to try and see what God has been doing, how you've been relating to God throughout your day. And you build that in as a daily habit, you start to get this muscle exercised, that you start to see how God has been active. Second here is Sabbath and retreat. This weekly practice, and then the retreat being maybe like once or twice a year, to be able to remove yourself from all the distractions going on in your life that would otherwise keep you busy, keep you going, and you don't have enough time to just be with God, to exist with God, and have that quality time with him. You have to be able to step away if you're going to be able to connect. You have to be able to remove yourself from these distractions if you're going to engage. Next is keeping a prayer journal. And what's cool about this one is you could see specific prayers being answered on certain timelines, and you can mark off a date saying, I've seen God answer this prayer. I've seen God do this amazing thing. Because oftentimes we will pray, But when we don't keep log of it, we don't keep track of it, we can almost see those things happen, but then not actually notice the overall arc of God doing these amazing things in our lives and actually hearing us out, engaging with us at that heart level, the things that we're desiring deeply from him. And the last one here is a little bit more conceptual, but it's been important to me personally, is meditating on God's personhood. And what I mean by that is sometimes if you're anything like me, it can be difficult, it can be easy actually to think of God as more of a nice idea or a set of values that I ascribe to, but not engaging with him as a person. That it's more about Christianity than it is about Christ, right? Christ, God as a person, the Father, Son, and Spirit are three persons in one, and try and understand the Trinity. But God is personal. God is person. So the more that we understand that, it's hard to picture God's activity in your life if you don't dwell on him being a person who's alive and active. If it's just kind of this general force, then you're not going to be aware of him actually doing things as a person. So to wrap this up, as we go into communion, I understand that it can be hard at times to slow ourselves down and actually engage with God at that level to see what he's doing. But if nothing else, the main things to really focus on and can get you going is understanding what a gift it is to have life. What a gift it is to have the opportunity of salvation. These basic things that we can take for granted. I mentioned that scripture before in Acts of life, breath, and everything else. If we focus on just the core basic things that he did not have to create us, this is a demonstration, an expression of his love that we are even here to begin with. And on top of that, being able to have a hope of some kind of future with him in heaven, that we have salvation at our fingertips through the blood of Jesus, that will set up a pattern of gratitude and acknowledgement of what God is doing at the more nuanced levels, because those things are so core and connected to so many other things. So if you're having a hard time picturing it out, think of just that. Think of the great gift of life and of salvation. And let's go ahead and do that now as we go ahead and pray for communion.